The screaming alarms echoed through every corridor of New Thermopylae colony as Kim Jisoo stared at the glowing screens in front of her. Her hands were shaking slightly as she counted the red dots appearing on the display. 37 enemy ships had just appeared at the edge of their solar system, and she recognized their distinctive shapes immediately. Zephyrian warships, the kind that turned entire planets into glass. Jisoo had been running this mining colony for 8 years now, and she'd never seen anything like this. The red warning lights bathed the command center in an eerie glow as more and more hostile contacts appeared on her screens. Each dot represented a massive alien warship, bristling with weapons that could level cities. Park Hyun. How much time do we have? She called out to her security chief, trying to keep her voice steady. Park Hyun was hunched over his tactical display, running calculations that he probably wished would give him different numbers. His weathered face looked grim as he turned toward her. The lead ships will reach our outer sensor perimeter in 6 hours, maybe 7 if we're lucky, and they decide to take their time. Jisoo felt her stomach drop. 6 hours to prepare for an invasion that they had no hope of stopping. She looked around the command center at the faces of her staff. These weren't soldiers or marines. They were miners, engineers, scientists, and administrators. Good people who had volunteered to spend their lives on this remote world, extracting the rare minerals that kept human civilization running. "What about our defenses?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer would be bad news. Park Hyun shook his head slowly. "Our defense grid was installed 40 years ago when this place was first built. The plasma cannons might hold them off for an hour, maybe 2 if we're extremely lucky. After that..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The door to the command center burst open, and Dr. Lee Minho rushed in, his lab coat still covered in mineral dust from whatever experiment he'd been working on. The colony's chief researcher looked panicked as he hurried over to Jisoo's station. "I've been trying to contact Earth Command for the past 3 hours," he said breathlessly. "Every frequency, every emergency channel we have. All I'm getting is the same automated message telling me that Earth Command is currently unavailable and to try again later." Jisoo closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Of course Earth Command was unavailable. When had they ever been available when the outer colonies needed them? New Thermopylae was just another forgotten outpost, too far from Earth to matter, too small to be worth defending. She thought about the 3,000 people living in this colony, families who had made this harsh world their home, children who had been born here and knew no other life, elderly miners who had spent decades pulling precious metals from the asteroid belts, scientists like Minho who were making discoveries that could benefit all of humanity. All of them were about to die because some alien empire had decided their little world looked like an easy target. "Send one more transmission to Earth," Jisoo ordered, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her chest. "Tell them that the colonists of New Thermopylae remember their oath to humanity, even if Earth has forgotten about us." The message would probably never reach anyone who cared enough to act on it, but at least they would die knowing they had tried everything possible to call for help. The air in New Thermopylae's main square shimmered and crackled with energy as a massive holographic projection suddenly appeared above the crowd. People had gathered here after hearing the emergency broadcasts, their faces filled with worry and confusion. Children clung to their parents' hands, while elderly colonists whispered prayers under their breath. The hologram solidified into the imposing figure of an alien commander. Admiral Kethvar stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled green skin glistening under the artificial lights. His reptilian eyes swept across the crowd with obvious disgust, and when he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. "Humans of New Thermopylae," he began, his words dripping with contempt. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Your pathetic little colony has exactly one choice to make today." The crowd fell silent. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Kethvar's forked tongue flicked out as he continued his speech, clearly enjoying the fear he was causing. "You will immediately surrender all mining operations to the Empire. Your workers will serve us, your resources will belong to us, and your families will submit to imperial rule. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." Murmurs of anger and fear rippled through the crowd. Some people started backing away, while others moved closer together for comfort. Kethvar raised his clawed hand for silence. However, I am not unreasonable. If you comply with these terms within the next 4 hours, your lives will be spared. You will be relocated to suitable work camps where you can serve the Empire's greater purpose. From the back of the crowd, a gruff voice called out, "And what if we refuse?" Choi De-hyun pushed through the crowd, his weathered face showing no fear despite the massive alien projection looming over him. The former Earth Navy veteran had served in 3 conflicts before retiring to this quiet mining world, and he wasn't about to be intimidated by another alien bully. Kethvar's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "If you refuse, this entire colony will be reduced to ash and molten rock. Your families, your children, your elderly, all of them will burn together." The crowd gasped, but De-hyun stood his ground. "This is human territory protected by Earth law. We don't bow to alien tyrants who threaten innocent people." Kethvar's laugh sounded like grinding metal mixed with breaking glass. The sound made several children start crying. "Human law? Earth protection? How naive you are, old soldier. I have conquered 17 star systems with this exact same offer. Do you know how many were foolish enough to refuse me twice?" He paused dramatically, letting the question hang in the air. None. Because there was nothing left of them to refuse a second time. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then conversations erupted everywhere as people tried to process what they'd just heard. De-hyun turned to face his fellow colonists. These weren't soldiers or warriors. They were miners, engineers, teachers, and farmers. But they were also humans. And humans had never been good at giving up without a fight. "Listen to me," he called out, his voice carrying across the square. "We've got mining charges that can punch through starship armor. We've got construction mechs that can be turned into weapons. Most importantly, we've got something that alien scum doesn't understand, the will to fight for our families." Meanwhile, millions of miles away in Earth's Solar Command Center, an advanced computer system was analyzing the flood of incoming communications. The AI had been programmed to identify priority signals, and the distress call from New Thermopylae triggered every alert protocol in its database. Admiral Yoon Seojun was reviewing fleet deployment reports when his personal communicator chimed. With an urgent message, he glanced at the screen and felt his blood turn to ice. The colony designation was one he knew by heart. His son Yoon Ji-hoon worked there as a mining engineer. Far beyond the orbit of Pluto, where the sun appeared as nothing more than a distant star, something incredible was hidden in the darkness of space. Massive construction yards floated silently in the void, their metal frameworks stretching for hundreds of miles in every direction. These weren't ordinary shipyards that appeared on any public records or government databases. They were humanity's most carefully guarded secret. For 50 years, Earth's brightest minds had been working here in complete secrecy. Engineers, scientists, and military specialists had dedicated their entire careers to a single project that most of humanity didn't even know existed. The Earth's Supreme Fleet had been built for one purpose: to protect human colonies. When the galaxy finally showed its true hostile nature, Admiral Yoon Seojun walked through the corridors of the dreadnought Indomitable, his footsteps echoing off the polished metal walls. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times larger than anything Earth had ever publicly acknowledged building. Advanced quantum processors hummed quietly in the walls around him, managing systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The Admiral's mind kept returning to the distress signal from New Thermopylae. His son Ji-hoon was there, probably, helping coordinate the colony's desperate defenses right now. The thought of his boy facing down an alien invasion fleet, with nothing but mining equipment and determination, made his chest tight with worry and pride. He stepped onto the bridge and was immediately struck by the organized chaos of preparation. Officers moved efficiently between stations, their voices calm and professional, despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Holographic displays showed the positions of dozens of ships, each one representing years of secret development and construction. Commander Han Sora approached him with a datapad in her hands. She was young for her rank, but she'd been specifically chosen for this mission because of her expertise in quantum navigation systems. Admiral, all fleet elements are reporting ready status. The quantum fold space generators are fully charged and standing by. Seojun looked at the tactical display showing their fleet composition. Battleships that could level planets, destroyers faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen, and support vessels equipped with technology that would seem like magic to most civilizations. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who had sworn an oath to protect human colonies, no matter how far from Earth they might be. The rest of the galaxy saw Earth as a peaceful world focused on trade and scientific exploration. Human diplomats had spent decades carefully cultivating this image, letting alien civilizations believe that humanity was too soft and divided to pose any real threat. It was the perfect cover for what they'd really been doing during those peaceful decades. While other species had been fighting wars and expanding their territories through conquest, humanity had been quietly preparing for the day when someone would threaten their scattered children among the stars. They'd developed weapons that could tear holes in reality itself, shields that could absorb the energy of entire suns, and engines that could cross the galaxy in minutes rather than months. "Sir," Han Sora continued, "the quantum fold calculations are complete. We can reach New Thermopylae in 17 minutes. 17 minutes to cross thousands of light years. The Zephyrians probably thought they had hours to finish their conquest before anyone could possibly respond. They had no idea that Earth's response was already on its way." Seojun activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice would reach every ship in the formation, every captain and crew member who had trained their entire careers for this moment. "All vessels, this is Admiral Seojun. Operation Guardian Shield is now active. Today we remind the galaxy why you never threaten human families. We have a colony to save and a message to send." The Supreme Fleet began to move, reality bending around their quantum drives as they prepared to demonstrate that Earth's children were never truly alone in the darkness. The first attack came without warning. Massive beams of green energy lanced down from orbit, striking New Thermopylae's protective shields with the force of lightning strikes. The entire colony shuddered as the energy barriers absorbed hit after hit, their blue glow flickering dangerously with each impact. Kim Ji-soo gripped the edge of her command console as another wave of enemy fire hammered their defenses. The underground command bunker was supposed to be the safest place in the colony, but even here, 30 feet below ground, she could feel the vibrations from each blast. Warning lights flashed red across every display, and the constant alarms made it hard to think clearly. "Evacuation status report," she called out over the chaos. 70% of civilians are in the deep shelters," came the reply from her communications officer. "The remaining families are moving through the tunnel networks now." Above ground, Park Hyun was coordinating their desperate defense from a reinforced bunker near the main habitat domes. He watched his tactical display as more enemy contacts appeared in the colony's airspace. Dozens of Zephyrian fighters were swooping down like predatory birds, their weapons blazing, as they targeted anything that moved. "All defensive positions, this is command," he spoke into his headset. "Enemy fighters are making strafing runs on Sectors 7 and 12. Use the mining charges sparingly. We don't have many left." In the colony's industrial sector, young Oh Min-jae was learning that his mining academy training hadn't prepared him for actual combat. The 20-year-old had volunteered to pilot one of the construction mechs after the older operators had been assigned to other critical tasks. The massive machine wasn't designed for fighting, but its industrial arms could launch mining charges with deadly accuracy. "Target acquired," he muttered to himself, watching a Zephyrian fighter streak across his targeting display. His hands were shaking as he armed one of the improvised explosives. These mining charges were designed to crack open asteroids, not shoot down enemy aircraft, but they were all the colonists had. "Mining charge away," he shouted into his communication system as he fired the explosive. The charge streaked through the air, trailing smoke, and struck the enemy fighter's wing. The alien craft spun out of control and crashed into the rocky ground, outside the colony perimeter. Direct hit. Min-jae couldn't believe he'd actually managed to bring down an enemy ship. His celebration was cut short as two more fighters appeared on his sensors, both heading straight for his position. Near the colony's outer defensive ring, Choi Dae-hyun watched through his binoculars as the real invasion began. Large Zephyrian. Transport ships were descending from orbit, their hulls glowing red-hot from atmospheric entry. Each ship probably carried hundreds of alien soldiers, all of them armed with weapons far superior to anything the colonists possessed. "All units fall back to secondary positions," he ordered his small team of defenders. Most of them were maintenance workers and engineers who had never held a weapon before today. "Remember what we practiced. Make every shot count and don't waste ammunition on targets you can't hit." The first dropship touched down in a cloud of superheated steam. Its armored doors began to open, revealing the dark interior packed with Zephyrian warriors. Deep underground in the colony's medical bay, Dr. Lee Min-ho was treating the first wave of casualties. The wounded were mostly people who had been caught. Outside when the attack began, burns from energy weapons, cuts from flying debris, and broken bones from falling when the ground shook. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, sat on one of the medical beds with tears streaming down her face. Her parents had been separated from her during the evacuation, and she was terrified by the explosions echoing through the tunnels. "Don't worry," Minho said gently as he bandaged a cut on her arm. "We just need to hold out a little longer. Someone will come for us. Earth never abandons its people." He hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. Above them, the colony's shields were beginning to fail after absorbing too much punishment. The protective barrier flickered like a dying light bulb, and everyone knew it wouldn't last much longer. When the shields finally collapsed completely, the real battle for New Thermopylae would begin. The mining tunnels beneath New Thermopylae had become a maze of desperate hope and deadly ambushes. These passages, carved out over decades of mineral extraction, stretched for miles in every direction. The colonists knew every twist, every hidden shaft, and every maintenance access point. The Zephyrian invaders, on the other hand, were stumbling around in unfamiliar darkness. Min-jae crouched in a narrow ventilation shaft, his breathing heavy after crawling through cramped spaces for the past hour. Behind him, 5 other young miners waited for his signal. They'd become an unlikely strike team, using their intimate knowledge of the tunnel system to hit the enemy where they least expected it. "Listen," he whispered to his team. "The third walker should be passing over us in about 30 seconds. Remember, we plant the charges on the leg joints, not the main body. These things are tough, but their knees are weak points." Through the metal grating beneath them, they could hear the thunderous footsteps of a Zephyrian assault walker. The massive machine was 20 feet tall and armed with enough firepower to level a city block. But it was also walking directly over a mining shaft that Min-jae and his friends had been using since they were teenagers. "Now," he breathed into his comm unit. They dropped through the grating like shadows, each one carrying mining charges that had been modified for combat. The Zephyrian crew inside the walker never saw them coming. Within seconds, 6 precisely placed explosives were attached to the machine's vulnerable joints. "Charges set," Min-jae reported, as they scrambled back into the tunnels. "Fire in the hole!" The explosion shook dust from the tunnel walls as the massive walker collapsed, its legs severed at the knees. Through their hidden cameras, they watched Zephyrian soldiers flee from the wreckage. "They don't know the tunnels like we do," Min-jae panted into his communication device, adrenaline making his voice shake. "That's the third walker down, moving to the next position." Above ground, the situation was becoming desperate. Choi Dae-hyun and his small team of defenders had taken position behind makeshift barricades near the main habitat domes. These buildings housed most of the colony's families, and the Zephyrians were pushing hard to reach them. "Kim Ji-soo, this is Dae-hyun," he spoke into his headset while ducking behind cover, as energy blasts scorched the air above him. "They're concentrating their attack on sectors 4 and 5. They want to reach the civilian shelters, and we can't hold this position much longer." His team consisted of a maintenance supervisor, 2 cargo handlers, and a retired teacher who had insisted on taking up arms to defend her students. None of them were soldiers, but they were fighting like veterans because they had everything to lose. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before they break through," Dae-hyun continued his report. "After that, there's nothing between them and the families. In orbit above the colony, Admiral Kethvar was growing increasingly frustrated. His invasion force was supposed to have conquered this pathetic human outpost within an hour. Instead, they'd been fighting for over 3 hours and were still taking casualties from these primitive defenders. "These humans fight like cornered animals," he snarled to his bridge crew. "They're using their mining equipment against us, hiding in there. Tunnels like insects, this ends now." He turned to his weapons officer. "Begin orbital bombardment of the civilian areas. If they want to hide underground, we'll collapse their tunnels on top of them." Back on the colony's surface, Park Hyun was manning the last functioning defense turret. The automated system had been damaged hours ago, so he was operating it manually, picking off enemy fighters as they swooped over the colony. Through his targeting scope, he could see Zephyrian ships moving into bombardment positions high above. "This is it," he whispered to himself, watching the enemy vessels charge their massive energy cannons. "At least we made them bleed." The first bombardment beam lanced down from orbit, striking the ground just outside the main habitat complex. The explosion shook the entire colony and left a crater 50 feet wide. More beams were already charging, ready to turn New Thermopylae into a tomb for everyone hiding below. The space around New Thermopylae began to shimmer and distort as if someone was bending reality itself. Stars seemed to stretch and warp, and the darkness of space rippled like water, disturbed by an enormous stone. The Zephyrian bombardment ships, preparing to unleash devastation on the colony below, suddenly found their sensors screaming warnings about massive energy distortions appearing all around them. In the command bunker deep beneath the colony, Kim Jisoo was staring at her sensor displays with her mouth hanging open. Her equipment was designed to track mining ships and cargo haulers, not military vessels, but even her basic scanners were going crazy with readings she'd never seen before. "What in the world?" she whispered, watching as enormous energy signatures materialized out of absolutely nothing. These weren't ships dropping out of hyperspace. This was something completely different. The readings were so massive that her computers kept throwing error messages, unable to process what they were detecting. Then the ships appeared, and Jisoo felt her heart skip a beat. Sleek, powerful vessels emerged from the quantum distortions, like metal sharks rising from dark water. Their hulls gleamed with armor plating that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. Each ship was clearly built for war, with weapon arrays and defensive systems that looked decades ahead of anything she'd ever seen. The largest vessel was absolutely massive, a dreadnought that dwarfed even the biggest Zephyrian battleships. Its hull stretched for over a mile, bristling with weapon systems and launch bays. Along its side she could just make out the name painted in bold letters, Indomitable. Suddenly, every communication frequency in the system crackled to life with a single clear voice. The transmission cut through Zephyrian jamming signals and colonial emergency channels alike, reaching every ship, every ground unit, and every frightened family hiding in the tunnels below. "This is Earth Command to all hostile forces currently engaged in unprovoked aggression against human civilians," the voice said with calm authority. "You have attacked a peaceful colony under the protection of Earth. You will withdraw your forces immediately and depart this system, or you will face the full consequences of your actions." In the mining tunnels beneath the colony, Oh Min-jae and his strike team were preparing for another ambush when they heard the transmission echoing through their communication devices. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then young Min-jae let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the tunnels. "Did you hear that?" he shouted to his team. "That's Earth Command. They actually came for us." His fellow miners were laughing and crying at the same time, hardly able to believe what they were hearing. They'd been fighting a hopeless battle against impossible odds, and now suddenly they weren't alone anymore. Above ground, Choi Dae-hyun was crouched behind his barricade when the Earth fleet appeared in the sky above them. The old veteran looked up at the massive ships hanging in space like protective angels, and tears began streaming down his weathered face. "They came," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Earth actually came for us." The other defenders around him were cheering and pointing at the sky, where human warships were taking up defensive positions around the colony. After hours of desperate fighting with makeshift weapons, Seeing their own people arrive with proper military hardware felt like a miracle. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kethvar stared at the impossible sight before him. His intelligence reports had assured him that Earth was a peaceful world with no significant military capability. They were supposed to be traders and explorers, too soft and divided to pose any real threat to the Zephyrian Empire. Impossible, he hissed, his reptilian features twisted with shock and growing fear. Our intelligence said they had no military capability. Where did these ships come from? His tactical officer was frantically trying to analyze the new arrivals. Admiral, I'm reading weapons signatures unlike anything in our database. Their energy output levels are... Sir, some of these readings don't make sense. The human fleet hung in space with perfect discipline, their formation flawless, and their weapons trained on every Zephyrian vessel in the system. The message was, clear? The rules of this fight had just changed completely. Admiral Kethvar's pride and arrogance overcame his shock as he stared at the human fleet. He had conquered 17 star systems by intimidation and overwhelming force, and he wasn't about to be scared off by these upstart humans, no matter how impressive their ships looked. All vessels, attack formation, he roared across the communication channels to his fleet. These humans think they can frighten the mighty Zephyrian Empire with a few fancy ships. Show them what real military power looks like. The response from Achiu, his fleet was immediate and devastating. 37 Zephyrian warships opened fire simultaneously, filling the space around New Thermopylae with deadly energy. Massive plasma cannons erupted with brilliant green light, while torpedo launchers sent waves of explosive projectiles streaking toward the human ships. The combined firepower was enough to glass an entire planet. For a few seconds, space itself seemed to burn as hundreds of weapons discharged their fury. The energy output was so intense that it created temporary aurora effects in New Thermopylae's atmosphere. Any normal fleet would have been vaporized in the first few seconds of such concentrated fire. But the Earth fleet wasn't normal. The human ships responded with weapons technology that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about warfare. Instead of the crude energy cannons used by most galactic civilizations, Earth's vessels fired coherent plasma lances that cut through space like swords of pure light. These beams were so precisely controlled that they sliced through Zephyrian energy shields as if they were made of tissue paper. The first Zephyrian cruiser to be hit simply ceased to exist. The plasma lance passed through its shields, armor, and hull without slowing down, leaving a perfectly circular hole that went from bow to stern. The ship's reactor exploded seconds later, creating a brief new star in the darkness. Commander Han Sora stood at her tactical station aboard the Indomitable, watching the battle unfold on her holographic displays. Her fingers danced across the control panels as she coordinated the fleet's response, and what she saw made her smile with professional satisfaction. Admiral, enemy formation is breaking apart, she reported to Yoon Seojun. Their weapons are having no effect on our shielding systems. Our adaptive defense grids are analyzing their fire patterns and neutralizing incoming attacks in real time. Indeed, the human ships seemed almost untouchable. Their defensive systems weren't just absorbing the Zephyrian attacks, they were learning from them. Each incoming energy beam or torpedo was analyzed by advanced computers that immediately adjusted the ship's shields to counter that specific type of weapon. Within minutes, the Zephyrian firepower was becoming completely ineffective. But it wasn't just the capital ships that were dominating the battle. Human fighter craft were streaming out of the larger vessels' launch bays, and their performance was nothing short of miraculous. Each small ship moved with impossible precision, executing maneuvers that should have killed their pilots from the gravitational forces involved. Lieutenant Nam Yuna was leading one of these fighter squadrons, her craft dancing through enemy formations like a leaf in the wind. Her cockpit was filled with holographic displays showing flight paths and targeting data, calculated by her AI co-pilot. The artificial intelligence could process combat information thousands of times faster than any biological brain, allowing her to react to threats before they even fully developed. "This is Falcon Lead to all units," she reported over the squadron frequency. "Enemy fighters are neutralized in Sector 7, moving to assist Hawk Squadron in Sector 12. Her wingmates followed her through a series of impossible turns and rolls, their ships moving in perfect synchronization. The Zephyrian fighters they encountered seemed to be moving in slow motion by comparison. Every human pilot had an AI partner that could predict enemy movements and calculate optimal attack angles in microseconds. "Falcon lead to fleet command," Yuna continued, her voice calm despite the chaos of battle around her. "Enemy fighter resistance is collapsing. They can't match our response times or targeting accuracy." The technological gap was becoming brutally obvious. The Zephyrians had brought superior numbers, but the humans had brought superior everything else. What had started as a routine conquest for the Zephyrian Empire was rapidly turning into their worst military disaster in decades. Ships that had struck fear into the hearts of 17 different civilizations were now burning wrecks, drifting through space. The mighty fleet that Admiral Kethvar had been so proud of was falling apart under the relentless assault of human technology. The Zephyrian vessels had been designed to intimidate and overwhelm primitive colonies with superior numbers and brute force tactics. Their crews were used to enemies who would surrender after seeing their massive warships, or who would fight with outdated weapons that barely scratched their armor. They had never faced an opponent who could match their firepower and then exceed it by orders of magnitude. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching in horror as his carefully planned invasion dissolved into chaos. His ship's shields, which had withstood the combined firepower of entire planetary defense fleets, were flickering and failing under the sustained assault of just 3 human plasma lances. The beams cut through his defenses like they were made of nothing more substantial than morning mist. "Damage report!" he roared at his bridge crew, but the answers he received only made his situation more desperate. "Forward shields at 15% and falling," his tactical officer reported. "Hull breaches on decks 12 and 15. Main. Reactor output dropping due to power grid failures." Kethavar's reptilian features twisted with disbelief and growing panic. "Impossible," he gasped, watching another one of his cruisers explode in a brilliant flash of light. "How did they advance so far beyond us? Our intelligence said Earth was decades behind galactic military standards." The truth was becoming painfully obvious. Earth hadn't been behind at all. They had been quietly surpassing everyone while letting the rest of the galaxy believe they were weak and defenseless. It was a deception that had worked perfectly, and now the Zephyrians were paying the price for their arrogance. Aboard the human dreadnought Indomitable, Commander Hans Sora was coordinating the systematic destruction of the enemy fleet with the efficiency of a surgeon removing a tumor. Her tactical displays showed the battle from every angle, and what she saw was a textbook example of technological superiority in action. "Admiral, the enemy formation has completely collapsed," she reported to Yoon Seojun. "They're trying to reorganize, but our targeting systems are tracking every movement they make. We're picking off their command ships first to prevent any coordinated response." The human strategy was brutally effective. Instead of engaging in a chaotic free-for-all, they were methodically eliminating key enemy vessels while protecting their own forces with advanced defensive systems. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver was planned, and every target was chosen for maximum tactical impact. "Sir," Han Sora continued, "the enemy flagship is signaling surrender. Admiral Kethvar is requesting permission to withdraw his remaining forces." Admiral Yoon Seojun looked at the tactical display showing the remnants of the once mighty Zephyrian fleet. Less than half of their ships were still operational, and most of those were damaged and limping. The battle had lasted less than 30 minutes, but it had completely shattered an invasion force that had taken months to assemble. "Surrender accepted," he said grimly. "Signal all Zephyrian vessels. You will withdraw from human space immediately and never return. Any ship that remains in this system for longer than 1 hour will be destroyed without further warning." Down on New Thermopylae's surface, the change in the battle's momentum was immediately obvious. Choi Dae-hyun and his small team of defenders watched through their scopes as Zephyrian ground forces began retreating toward their landing ships in obvious panic. The alien soldiers who had been advancing steadily toward the civilian shelters were now running for their lives. "Look at them go," one of the defenders said with amazement. "They can't get off our world fast enough." All across the colony, people began emerging from the underground tunnels and shelters. Families who had been hiding in terror just minutes before were now standing in the open, pointing at the sky where human warships hung like protective guardians. Many were crying with relief, while others were cheering and celebrating their miraculous salvation. The message that spread across the galaxy in the following days was simple and clear. Humanity protected its own, and anyone who threatened civilians would face consequences beyond their imagination. The first thing the colonists of New Thermopylae noticed after the battle ended was how quiet everything had become. The constant sound of explosions and weapon fire had stopped, replaced by the gentle hum of Earth's medical ships descending through the atmosphere like silver angels coming to heal the wounded. Dr. Lee Minho stood in the colony's makeshift medical bay, exhausted after hours of treating injured civilians with whatever supplies he could find. His hands were stained with blood, and his surgical tools were crude compared to what he'd trained with years ago. Then the Earth medical teams arrived, and suddenly he felt like he was witnessing magic. The human medics carried equipment that seemed to come from a completely different era of medicine. Handheld devices that could heal broken bones in minutes, scanners that could diagnose injuries just by pointing them at a patient, and medicines that worked faster and more effectively than anything in his colonial medical supplies. "Doctor, we could use your help with the trauma cases," one of the Earth medics said, handing him a medical scanner that felt impossibly light in his hands. "Your knowledge of the colonists' medical histories will be invaluable." Minho found himself working alongside physicians who had access to technology he'd only read about in scientific journals. Together, they treated wounds that would have been fatal just hours before, giving injured colonists a complete recovery instead of a death sentence. Across the colony, Admiral Yoon Seojin was walking through the damaged streets, searching for someone very specific. The battle was over, the enemy had been defeated, but his heart wouldn't rest until he found his son and knew he was safe. He found Jihoon working with a repair crew near the main power station, his engineering coveralls dirty and his face streaked with sweat. The young man was focused on reconnecting damaged power cables, completely absorbed in the technical work of getting the colony's systems back online. "Jihoon," Seojin called out softly. His son looked up, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Jihoon dropped his tools and ran toward his father, and they embraced in the middle of the damaged street. No words were needed. The hug said everything about fear and relief, about love and protection, about a father who had crossed the galaxy to save his son. "I knew you'd come," Jihoon whispered against his father's shoulder. "I told everyone that Earth wouldn't abandon us." Meanwhile, Colony Administrator Kim Jisoo stood with Park Hyun and Choi Dae-hyun on a hill overlooking their settlement. Below them, massive Earth engineering ships were working with incredible efficiency to repair the damage from the battle. Buildings that had been reduced to rubble were being reconstructed with advanced materials, and the colony's infrastructure was being upgraded with technology far superior to what they'd had before. "Look at that," Park Hyun said with wonder, watching as a damaged habitat dome was rebuilt in a matter of hours. "They're not just fixing what was broken, they're making everything better." Kim Jisoo nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We're not forgotten anymore," she said quietly. "For so many years I thought Earth had written us off as just another remote colony that didn't matter, but they were watching over us all along." Choi Dae-hyun, the old veteran who had led the colony's defense, was staring up at the massive human dreadnoughts still hanging in orbit like protective guardians. "Those ships represent something new," he said. "The galaxy is going to be a very different place from now on." Young Oh Min-jae was also looking up at those same warships, but his thoughts were focused on the future rather than the past. The 20-year-old miner who had helped fight off the invasion was already making plans that would change his life forever. "I want to serve on one of those ships," he told his friends who had fought beside him in the tunnels. "I want to join Earth's fleet and protect other colonies like they protected us. No human settlement should ever have to face what we faced today." His friends nodded in agreement, and Min-jae realized he wasn't alone in his decision. Many of the young colonists who had survived the battle were already talking about enlisting, about serving humanity's cause among the stars. The news of what had happened at New Thermopylae spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. Within days, Every major civilization knew that Earth possessed military technology that dwarfed anything they had previously seen. The Zephyrian Empire, once proud and aggressive, immediately sued for peace and began withdrawing their forces from contested territories. Other aggressive civilizations that had been planning expansion campaigns suddenly found themselves reconsidering their strategies. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted dramatically, and everyone knew it. Humanity's message echoed among the stars, carried by every communication network and diplomatic channel. They had been watching all along, quietly preparing, and they would never abandon their children to the darkness of space. The age of human protection had begun.